just as Christmas gift giving comes around, that my book is available in fine bookstores everywhere. It's already ranked 1.37 million on Amazon.com, even before it's released. So here's your chance to contribute to that meteoric rise. I'm trying to get it up to 1.3 million. I'm so very pleased to have an opportunity to be here, and only sorry that my friend of many years, Derek Bell, couldn't be here today. I actually had sent him a note saying, let's get together, as we often did when I was going to be here, and it was his staff member who wrote me back saying that he'd been hospitalized, and I knew that the end was near. So, as many of you do, I have him on my mind over this period of time. I had one of these odd occurrences in the last 2 weeks where it was my piñata week. For those of you who aren't Mexican, let me just say piñata is this paper mache, usually a donkey or something, with candy stuffed, and a child will be blindfolded and strike at it to extricate the candy. But I had that moment when I went to Texas A&M, and a group called the Young Aggie Conservatives, which I thought was redundant in and of itself. Turned out that they taped my talk and posted it to YouTube, which meant Uncle Michael was riding pretty high with my nieces and nephews, because they thought that I'm the first Olivas to make it there without having committed a crime. And they issued a press release that said, liberal professor backs Perry ploy on illegals. And so I had to, of course, go to YouTube and watch myself, and sure enough, they gave up the issue when they said they had done so they'd take me without permission. So I own up to everything that I said is no longer there because we had them take it down. But it was interesting to me that Governor Perry had been beaten up. He also had a piñata week of a different sort, but that what I had always figured was the one good thing he'd ever done was to sign into law a piece of legislation that I had written back in 2001. And one of my research assistants is now a trustee of the University of Houston and a Perry supporter. I have 3 Republican former research assistants, and they're all doing really quite well. Better than some of my Democrat ones, as it happens in Texas. But he called me up and he said, I told the governor I would talk with you. And I said, what about that press release? He said, yeah. I said, well, is he mad, or should I be mad? He says, oh, I think he's mad. Madder. He said, Olivas, he's the one that wrote that statute that I signed, right? He said, yes. He said, you think we can get him on our side? And he said, no. So it passed, but it was just interesting, this kind of intersection on this very issue. So I haven't had my full 15 minutes of fame, but I've had about 12 of those. And YouTube counted for a lot, like I said. I've got one niece that thinks it's very cool. She's the same one that Googled me and saw Michael Olivas had over 1 million hits on it. Well, it turned out Michael Jackson lives in Las Olivas, California. And so all these hits came up. So I'm still working on that thing for my nieces and nephews. Even though I'm the oldest of 10 and so is my wife, we have no children, so I live vicariously through my nieces and nephews. The interesting thing about this issue to me, because I teach both higher ed law as well as immigration law, is how this intersection truly affects such a small number of people, but has generated such an enormous controversy, completely disproportionate to the numbers. By my estimates, there are around 60,000 DreamAct students in the United States. That's Ohio State's campus, one campus. I was going to say Penn State, but they're having their own piñata week. So why would we have 15 cases? Why would we have 14 states that have acted in the affirmative and a half dozen have acted in a restrictionist fashion about this particular issue? And I think that and people ask me this a lot. I think that the answer is that undocumented children, Plyler children, are off limits. That is truly the third rail. No one can go there. They're safe, but their parents aren't safe. Delivering them to school doesn't make them safe. In New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexico, my hometown, as well as Detroit and other cities, Austin, they've had raids on parents bringing children back and forth from school. So school may be a sanctuary, but they are not. And the ratcheting up of immigration, particularly E-Verify and these kinds of things, is clearly due to wanting to extirpate, to pull out undocumented parents, even if it means sending them back to the home country, wherever that would mean removing citizen children. We admit in the record every year well over 100,000 citizens being repatriated to their home country, their parents' home country. Of course, this is their home country. Well, they're doing so because at 18 they can present their credentials and come back in. So restrictionists figured, well, no harm, no foul. They had it coming anyway. And I think that this blends over into these undocumented college students, because even though they may have to concede the equity of Plyler versus Doe, which has never been relitigated, that doesn't mean they're Plyler children any longer, because now they're 18 and they're the age of majority and their legal status may shift. Certainly their availability shifts. So I truly believe that's at bottom here, and I'd be open to other things that people have to add to that particular discourse. Just this last year, in this obscure area, there have been statutes passed in Wisconsin so as to repeal the 2009 law that gave in-state tuition. Of course, as you might imagine, pull factor that it is, they had been overrun by 140 undocumented students. They had been overrun by 140. So that's like a section of Latin at Madison. But they repealed it. Maryland enacted it, but because they got enough voters to sign a ballot measure, it was frozen, and it will come up as a ballot measure this next year. Rhode Island, to their credit, got the state board, which is responsible for residency tuition, to pass a measure. Illinois passed a state statute allowing schools to award scholarships to these students. I might add, this is completely unnecessary, that any school could have already done this. California passed 3 state statutes. One allowed the same sort of symbolic awarding of the scholarships, but one was much more functional. AB 131 allows in-state, not only in-state tuition, but for these so-called AB 540 students, they also get state financial aid. But it won't kick in until 2013, and ballot measure, I can smell ballot measure there too. Another good thing was that ballot measures now in California can only be run in November, so people can organize a bit better against this, but that's going to happen. And then Connecticut passed a resident tuition statute, the only one that's freestanding as a statute that was added this last year. Now, in the meantime, we lost ground in several other states, because there are now several states that have banned these students or banned them from getting financial aid or in-state tuition, which is entirely political theater, because the default position is you don't get it. The state has to affirmatively pass such a statute for any undocumented student to get this kind of assistance or this benefit or this status. So when Alabama, Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Indiana, and South Carolina all pass statutes, you know there's just trying to get people on the record for this issue, because they're completely unnecessary. They were already ineligible. In addition, both Georgia and North Carolina have passed rules saying the same thing, even though they weren't statutes. Those actually make more sense if the statute's silent. So for every step forward, there's been at least one stutter step back. And I think that if we were to add if we were to get a plan like this in Arizona and in Florida, we would probably have all the major receiver states, with apologies to those of you who live, if we would add New Jersey, of course. Yes, I've already given up hope about New Jersey in that regard, because a Democrat had it on his desk. He could have signed it, but chose not to. Now, 2 very recent developments I think are important here. One is In its rush to keep the undocumented out of schools in Alabama, they actually wrote a statute that was so broad that it even kept people who are permanently residing under color of law here, like refugees and asylum seekers. And so it was enjoined by the district court judge there as well. And this one really is a case I wish I had known about, so I could have sued and won, because this one's really going to be a cakewalk, I think. But it turns out that Florida is not giving in-state tuition to citizen children whose parents are undocumented. And this is the first state I've ever heard doing this. They will lose this case, and honestly, if you want a safe bet, this is a loser case. But in the meantime, I think they're going to have to settle, because they will lose this. California went to court, and I was on the group that sued them, and we got them to overturn that. It was for financial aid. And at the time, they didn't have AB 131, so the undocumented weren't eligible. But once you're a citizen child, you may be deported if you're a minor because your parents' residence extends to you. Your domicile or your residence is that of your parents until you're 18. But absent that, there's no asterisk on citizenship. That is, the end was near. So, as many of you do, I have him on my mind over this period of time. I had one of these odd occurrences in the last 2 weeks where it was my piñata week. For those of you who aren't Mexican, let me just say piñata conservatives, which I thought was redundant in and of itself. Turned out that they taped my talk and posted it to YouTube, which meant Uncle Michael was riding pretty high with my nieces and nephews, because they thought that I'm the first Olivas to make it there without having committed a crime. Is this paper mache, usually a donkey or something, with candy stuffed, and a child will be blindfolded and strike at it to extricate the candy. But I had that moment when I went to Texas A&M, and a group called the Young Aggie Conservative. I'm trying to get it up to 1.3 million. I'm so very pleased to have an opportunity to be here, and only sorry that my friend of many years, Derek Bell, couldn't be here today. I actually had sent him a note saying, let's get together, as we often did when I was going to be here, and it was his staff member who wrote me back saying that he'd been hospitalized, and I knew that just as Christmas gift giving comes around, that my book is available in fine bookstores everywhere. It's already ranked 1.37 million on Amazon.com, even before it's released. So here's your chance to contribute to that meteoric rise.